in America, it's hard for us to win. But we need to focus on taking care of our material needs while building up a anti-war movement, an anti-capitalist movement, a proletariat movement. So we need to focus on mutual aid. That is what Rome is doing with Tour for the Poor. That is what we're doing, launching RBN chapters all over this country, so we can separate ourselves from the capitalist system. Once we separate ourselves from the capitalist system by building mutual aid societies, we show up and build those mutual aid societies via third party. So when we do our food drives, whenever we show up and help people, we're letting people know that we showed up. You have a mutual aid party that show up, that are taking care of the people while the politicians is abandoning us. We build this movement, we get on the debate stage. All we need is 5%. A lot of people don't know that 5% in the third party gets you federal funding. 15% puts you on a national debate stage. Now, remember, 3% is all you really need historically to have massive social change. And then a lot of people, like, if you shut stuff down via general strike, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, just give them what they want, right? So you just need to build that momentum. If we had a third party to get 5% federal funding, running on popular ideas, economic populism while ending the war, that coalition is already here. We just need to put it together. Then if we get to 15%, we're talking about a real game changer where we had a third party candidate. What I would like to see a populist, anti-war third party candidate calling out neocons on both sides. And if you got 15% of the population, enough to get you on the debate stage, you're talking about serious coalition building power that the establishment have to acknowledge. And if they don't acknowledge and they continue to fight us and be anti-democratic, then we talk about general strikes. Then we talk about shutting society down. This is when we get into the topic that the boutique managerial class, a lot of people who are comfortable, they don't want to have the discussion because they don't want society shut down. But that is what we must do. And with the population and with the populace on our side, this is how you enact change. Now, George, everything I just described to you, this is a long process. Like, it's not easy. It takes a lot of revolutionary discipline, but that's why we need to get started right now.
Right now.
Right now.
What's popping, my friends, my family? You guys see, I outline RBN's theory of change here. That is based on movement building. It is not based on us wishing that some hero shows up and somehow saves us. As I describe my vision for what a third-party movement will look like, the reaction of the professional managerial class, as I explained, and as you guys saw, Crystal Ball, when asked about third parties, in reference to Marianne Williamson, she told us to grow up. Get serious, grow up. Which one of us have a more coherent theory of change? Because I can outline it for many people. What I'm outlining takes a lot of work, but this will give a lot of political capital and power to the people and allow us to separate ourselves from this violent and brutal capitalist system. So are we going to get Medicare for all anytime soon? No. We're not going to get Medicare for all no matter if we go to the Democratic Party or go to the third party. But as I lay out my theory of change here, you guys see the emphasis of third party mutual aid community building. So yes, the third party may not be winning immediately, but with the main focus of the third party being meeting people's material needs, engaging in mutual aid, showing up for people, that is how we help each other survive capitalism as we continue to build a movement to overthrow capitalism. This is a very crucial part because when you form a mutual aid society, an organization like I'm trying to in Kansas City, you don't have to run campaign ads. You don't have to run the boutique boutique campaign. It's a horrible waste of money. People will support your party because you showed up for them. That you have their material interests at heart. That you calling out both parties. This is the kind of analysis that you will never get from Breaking Points. You won't get it from Vanguard. You won't get it from Cal. You won't get it from Majority Report or anyone who calls themselves left channels. The Vanguard have the nerve to call themselves anti-capitalist, but they can't even sum up a strategy or a theory of change that is rooted in anti-capitalist principles. What I am telling you guys is rooted in anti-capitalist principles. I believe that we should run third party. I am supportive of a small effort towards electoral politics, which mostly results, which should pour into ballot initiatives and running socialist, Marxist, third-party organizations, not just any dumbass, right? We got to be a smarter proletariat. We gotta have a strategy instead of this nonsense where they just pretend, oh, let's have vibes. Let's support Marianne Williamson and hope the working class will be okay. The only people that are going to benefit from Marianne Williamson's campaign is her, because she wants to sell books, people like Peter Dow, who's on salary, and the people who will benefit via clicks and views and monetize interviews with her. That's why they lie and they bullshit you guys. That's why we have been adamant in calling out the scourge of access journalism. Because instead of having a serious discussion on how we move this left movement after Bernie Sanders betrayed us, they like, come on, let's just pray that Marianne Williamson can do that, something that Bernie cannot do. Let's waste tens of millions of dollars once again, and let's just pray things will be okay. Surely, we know that Marianne Williamson is not as good as Bernie Sanders, but if we gave her hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm sure things would work out. And who are the only people saying this? And we know these are the only people because Marianne Williamson poll numbers are horrible. The people who are friends with her, Crystal Ball. And these people are particularly full of shit. Because I remember during the early discourse about this, where they said, we need anyone that can run a primary challenge against Joe Biden. And the people who was Marianne Williamson friends, who tried to manufacture consent for Marianne Williamson, they were saying stuff like this. They were saying, well, we're not pushing Marianne Williamson because she's our friend. We are pushing this because on principle, we want a credible primary challenger for Joe Biden. Do you guys remember that? You guys remember when they were saying that? Oh, well, I'm not pushing Marianne because she's our friend. I just want someone to challenge Joe Biden. Bullshit. So I'm post-duopoly left. I'm not going to vote in the primary. Don't plan on supporting anyone financially as well. Not planning on supporting any of them. But if you was one of the people that actually like, man, I think we should have a primary challenge on Joe Biden, and I am only supporting Marianne Williamson because of that, wouldn't you support RFK considering RFK is at 20%? You guys know RFK is doing better than Ron DeSantis is doing against Donald Trump. So the people who like Crystal Ball, we're going to get into her very soon, the people like the Vanguard, many of these people that say, well, we're not just friends with Marianne, we just want to see a primary challenger. Well, if that was the case, you guys would support RFK, wouldn't you? Because he's the most credible primary challenger to Joe Biden. The fact that they are not, and not only are they not supporting RFK, even though they support the strategy of going through the Democratic Party, they're actively trying to tear him down, which shows that it was never about any principles. It was never about just having a primary challenger in the Democratic Party. It was all about elevating their friend who was going to give them access to them. So when this strategy that they came up with, were we going to push Marianne Williamson? The first thing that me and CJ came up, one of the first things, we were like, okay, what happens if Marianne Williamson is not the only person running like you guys claim? There's a giant hole in your plan. Now, Marianne Williamson and their supporters are 100% okay with playing spoiler in this election. You have someone else who has over 2 times more support for Marianne Williamson than Marianne Williamson. But they support her because they're her friends. They give ridiculous political analysis because she's her friend. And that is what we called out. And people thought that, they're going to be professional about this, even though they're friends. And Crystal Ball had an interview with RFK that showed that is absolutely not the case. Absolutely not the case. My brother CJ, my brother Kit, did a great stream on this earlier. I wanted to join them by watching the big Champions League semifinal game. Man City beat the fuck out of Real Madrid. I don't know how many of you guys watch European soccer. European soccer is like the only non-combat sport that I like. So that's why I didn't join today. I have a lot to say on this, so I'm going to get into it. first thing I noticed when I saw this interview, and this is how you know that Marianne Williamson, Crystal Ball, did this interview to try to chip at RFK. Because Crystal wanted to anoint Marianne. So the Vanguard, Breaking Points, Kyle Kalinske, and all of these Marianne Williamson stands have been in shambles. They've been in shambles ever since RFK announced. Because even though I'm not supporting any of them, RFK is undeniably the better candidate. If RFK and Marianne Williamson got into the debate, there is no doubt in my mind RFK will run her over, run through her, which is why they're not calling for it. But to compensate for this, Crystal Ball, who had Marianne Williamson officiate her wedding, decided to do this complete sham of an interview. And I have this part, because this part right here is actually not giving enough coverage. This is how I knew what Crystal Ball's intent was. Listen to this part of the interview.
A little bit about that.
Oh, let me turn it up. Let's listen to this part.
We both watched a lot of interviews of you, and both on a general interest, but also to prepare for this interview and sitting down with you. And I think some of the key issues that you tend to focus on are COVID, the Ukraine war, and censorship. Those are all issues where you seem to be in basic agreement with the former president, Donald Trump. So I'd love for you to lay out, what do you see as some of the most critical differences you have with the former president?
What? This is the amazing analysis that you get from the professional managerial class. And I worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign, guys. I remember the same tactics that they use on Bernie Sanders. They used to say stuff like this. They say, hey, your criticism of Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation sounds very similar to Trump. You're saying that we shouldn't trust the establishment. Why do you sound just like Trump? That is what they used to say about Bernie all the time. To plant seeds into the liberal audience that there's similarities between Trump and Bernie, so you should be afraid. So Crystal, right off the bat, want her audience to compare RFK to Trump. This is a long time media strategy to demonize candidates that they do not like. They did the same thing to Bernie Sanders. So as soon as I saw this part, my ear perked up, and I knew immediately what Crystal Ball was doing. Because she wanted to activate the tribalistic brain of her shit-lipped supporters. RFK Trump, I don't like the guy. And you know she is full of shit, because before she asked the question, she says, I watched hours and hours of interviews with you. You watched hours of interviews with RFK Jr., and after that, you conclude that he's similar to Trump? Do anyone believe that? Do anyone believe that Crystal Ball believes that? I heard RFK speak not for hours. I maybe got a combined total of 30 to 50 minutes of RFK time listening to him speak. And after listening to RFK speak for 30 to 50 minutes, I wouldn't even begin to think of Donald Trump. What does it say about Crystal Ball that she hears someone speak about against the Ukraine war, call out Big Pharma, and all of a sudden you comparing him to Trump? Do you guys believe that she believed that? I don't. I don't at all. She is doing an establishment trick that she learned from the establishment. To be clear. Now, I'm gonna get to the anti-vax part. Actually, I'll let you guys hear his answer just in case you don't know. Let's repeat this unbelievably MSNBC. This is an MSNBC question. Let's listen to this.
Let me ask you a little bit about that, because we both watched a lot of interviews of you, and both on a general interest, but also to prepare for this interview and sitting down with you. And I think some of the key issues that you tend to focus on are COVID, the Ukraine war, and censorship. Those are all issues where you seem to be in basic agreement with the former president, Donald Trump. So I'd love for you to lay out, what do you see as some of the most critical differences you have with the former president?
So RFK nicer than me. Listen to his answer.
Well, I have a lot of not only issue differences, but stylistic differences. I think my approach to people and politics is very different. I'd say, in terms of issues, probably the biggest departure is on the environment. And in fact, my first encounter with Donald Trump is that I sued him twice, in the years before he was president, to block his construction of golf courses, two golf courses, which I said.
So you did all this research on RFK, Crystal Ball, but you didn't know that he sued Trump. Very interesting.
Successfully did in the New York City watershed. But on all of the, environmental issues, I think my worldview is very different than the president's.
Way different. And once again, RFK is handling this question with amazing grace, which is why I would never be a politician, because this is the best strategy, right? But I couldn't do it. Because if you ask me this question about RFK, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And that's essentially what he says here. At the very end, in a very polite way, he said, dude, I am completely different from Trump. I would say I am completely different with Trump. What the fuck is wrong with you for asking me that question? Even implying that I am similar to Trump. Right? So that's his I want to get to that answer because there's a lot of stuff in this interview worth talking about. And before I get to the vaccine debate, I do want to cover a criticism I have of RFK. Once again, none of these people are my candidates. But because his position on the Ukraine war, because he generally supports single payer in practice, he supports a lot of progressive ideas, economic reformation. The fact that he calling out big pharma and war immediately makes him way better than Marianne Williamson. But this answer regarding Medicare for all, can't ignore. We got to critically break this down. Luckily, Breaking Points is better than us. They got timestamps, so I'm gonna go to this part here.
As you know, every other developed nation in the world has universal health care. Do you support universal health care through a Medicare for all program or something similar?
I would say my highest ambition would be to have a single payer program, which, with people who want to have private programs can go ahead and do that. But
Nope. What do you say? Now you gotta RFK. You gotta clarify when you say that. Let's play it again.
I would say my highest ambition would be to have a single payer program, which, with people who want to have private programs can go ahead and do that.
That is not single payer healthcare, RFK. The point of single payer healthcare is that you don't have multiple tiers of healthcare. Now, you can have cosmetic surgery. You can have, because cosmetic surgery, most people don't even believe that should be covered via single payer, right? So you can get extension healthcare if you want a nose job, if you want a boob job or something like that, right? But the single payer healthcare system that we advocate for is everyone has the same tier, because if you start having people have private healthcare insurance, then you have healthy people, wealthy people outside of the pool. If you have people outside of the single payer pool, that does not drive down the cost, which single payer healthcare would do. You will have great people healthcare, rich people healthcare versus what everyone else has. So you want to design a single payer system that have dental and everything else. You want a universal single payer plan, which makes private plans insignificant, irrelevant. So everyone is paying to the same pool. This drives down healthcare cost. So this is not a good answer by RFK. Well, he did say he supports single payer in theory. He would love to make it happen. But we are talking about anointing a leader here. There's someone who's not going to be a leader on this issue. And this is someone who had grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunts going to medical debt who died. Everyone in is single payer. Saying that some people should have private healthcare, that is not single payer. That is not single payer. That was the problem with Tosi's bill.
But this is one of my biggest issues, guys. And this is something that you can't waver on. So this is not a good answer by RFK, but I'll let him continue.
But to have a single payer program that is available to everybody, I don't know how politically realistic that is. But, if you ask me if I were designing the system from the beginning, that's what I would do.
Now, there's some people that in this interview, and I gave a critique of his answer on single payer because I think he's misinformed. If you support single payer, you shouldn't be advocating for private healthcare. But people are saying that RFK is against single payer. I would say that is misleading because you clearly see here, he said he wants single payer. He just thinks it's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. Now, that was what most progressives say at this point. We like Medicare for all, but probably not going to happen. So there are a lot of Marianne Williamson people that are saying that RFK is against single payer. That is not what I'm hearing. I am hearing that he's not going to fight for it. And the fact that he don't really understand the ask of single payer healthcare, which is not great things, but I think we got to be clear on that.
Right. The system now is broken. We pay the most for healthcare in the world. I think we're 79th. We're behind like Costa Rica and Cuba in terms of health outcomes. We have the highest level of chronic disease in the world of any country. That means neurological diseases, autoimmune diseases, allergic diseases like peanut allergies, food allergies, eczema, anaphylaxis, asthma, and we pay more than anybody else. We also consume more pharmaceutical products. I think we take 3 to 4 times as many drugs per capita than Europeans do, and they're not making.
Why don't people have criticisms of that? I have criticism of Big Pharma. I called out the fact that they over-medicate antidepressant pills. And I remember the blowback I got on Twitter when I said that, like people, like as if I was directly calling you out particularly. If anyone believed that America is a properly diagnosed country when it comes to depression, you are out of your fucking mind. Anyway, I want to get to the anti-vax debate. That's a whole nother discussion. Our society is rotten. People are unfulfilled. People are working to death. People do not have any chance to pursue happiness because they're working all the time. And then the health industry says that our depression problem is because people's brains are broken. That is a ridiculous theory. That's a ridiculous theory. Your brain is broken because of our system. I am not saying that something is not wrong with you, but people are pretending that, oh my God, everyone in America have uniquely broken brains. Why is the happiness meter, why are there less depression in countries that are poorer than us? Why are we medicated 20 times more than other countries? Are you telling me that Americans are, there's something that happens when you live in North American soil that makes your brain breaks at 20 times more than Europe? There's so many people, the same way that there are vaccine cultists, there are people who are depression pill cultists. And I didn't even realize that until recently when I started questioning this shit. And the people are like, oh my God, you say that my depression isn't real? No, I didn't say that, motherfucker. I am making an obvious critique on how people are being overprescribed depression pills instead of having another alternative put to their place. And the system don't want to do that because it's better to just drug you up. It's better to say your brain is broken. You shut the fuck up. Something's wrong with you. So let's give us your pills and get back to work, motherfucker. That's what they tell us. I don't buy it, man. I don't buy that at all. So let's get to the vaccine debate. And another big part of this was Siger and Crystal Ball talking about nuclear energy, and this is something that they disagree with as well on RFK. And this showed that the purpose of them bringing RFK on was to highlight differences, was to attack and to debate. Because when Crystal talked to Marianne Williamson, I don't remember them having a big giant debate over nuclear energy, but he did when RFK is on. I didn't see Marianne Williamson grilled over her anti-vax takes, but RFK was. Now I'll play the part
that exposed Crystal Ball as a big pharma shill. What got her own audience calling her out, because this is the big vaccine COVID debate. And after this the quote unquote debate that Crystal Ball had with RFK, after this interview, I don't ever want to hear a Marianne Williamson fan ever complain about my interview ever again. Because I interrupted Marianne Williamson after allowing her to go on 90 seconds, 2 minutes. Like, she'll go on 90 seconds long diatribes 2 minutes in without answering my questions. And I'm like, man, no. No, you need to answer my fucking question. So Marianne Williamson fans got mad at me for doing that because I held her feet to the fire. Marianne Williamson got upset with me because I held her foot to the fire and I demanded her to answer my questions. Here, Crystal Ball just interrupts this motherfucker without ever allowing him to speak. I gave Marianne Williamson plenty of time to speak, but I was rude. But this is how you conduct an interview? I never want to hear people complain about how I handled Marianne Williamson after this nonsense. Because, as I said before, I am pro interrupting a politician. And I will interrupt a politician the second they won't answer my question. But Crystal will ask him a question. He started answering, and then she didn't like his answer, so she immediately started cutting him off. So let's. This is a debate. I'll let Lavi play it because there's a lot to say here.
Okay. So let me ask you about vaccines. This is an area where you and I have significant differences, and just to level with you on this, like a lot of what you say, I really respond to. I think you're a very genuine person, but the across the board, whether you want to call it vaccine skepticism or anti-vax advocacy, which has been a central part of what you've been up to for the past number of years. For me personally, it's an issue, and it's a real sort of red line. And I know.
Hold up. Crystal Ball. So someone's opinions on science and not agreeing with you on a particular science like vaccines, that's a red line. That's where you draw the line in the sand. But you are supporting Marianne Williamson, who is arming Nazis in Ukraine. You like Bernie Sanders, who's arming Nazis in Ukraine. Bernie Sanders, who is pro-war. This is what I do not understand about the professional managerial class. I don't understand their values. I legitimately don't understand your values. So someone having a different opinion over vaccines is a bigger deal than someone funding Nazis in Ukraine? Can someone explain that to me? I used to believe in body autonomy. Well, I still do believe in body autonomy, I should say. If someone chooses not to get the vaccine, or if someone just inherently don't trust the vaccine, what the fuck does that have to do with you? That had nothing to do with you. Nothing at all. But someone supporting war, someone supporting the military-industrial complex, I think that has something to do with all of us. So how do they draw these random lines in the sand? And I've been asking this question ever since we started RBN. So they will never vote for a Republican because a Republican is anti-abortion, but they vote for Jim Crow Joe who wrote the crime bill? So why? They will never vote for a Republican who's anti-gay, but they will vote for Joe Biden, a segregationist, one of the most anti-black politicians of all time. I do not understand their values. Okay? So if someone's anti-gay, that's a red line. Someone anti-black, not a red line? You gotta see how I'm confused with Democrats and progressives. And that's coming back to what Crystal Ball says. Marianne Williamson had horrific takes on Afghanistan. Marianne Williamson is a Zionist. And she's horrible on the Ukraine war. Those are not red lines for Crystal Ball. And ask yourself why. Class trumps all. She will never cross the military-industrial complex. She'll never draw a red line at that. But you'll draw a red line on some big pharma worshiping bullshit. It's ridiculous. No matter where you fall in the COVID vaccine debate, can we all acknowledge that? That it's ridiculous to have someone's opinion on vaccine as a red line, but you're okay with their pro-war positions? That is ridiculous. And I will continue to call out this inconsistency that I see. So I want you guys to hear that part again, because I want you guys to see her concerns.
Okay. So let me ask you about vaccines. This is an area where you and I have significant differences. And, just to level with you on this, like a lot of what you say, I really respond to. I think you're a very genuine person, but the across the board, whether you want to call it vaccine skepticism or anti-vax advocacy, which has been a central part of what you've been up to for the past number of years. For me personally, it's an issue, and it's a real sort of red line. And I know I'm not alone in that, especially running in a Democratic primary. There are going to be other millions of people.
And I'm gonna let the video play, but you guys know how many Marianne Williamson fans, and I'm making this point because they go after me. Like Marianne Williamson fans on Twitter, you see their comments on YouTube every once in a while. They will go after us because they believe we are too hard on Marianne Williamson because she supports arming Nazis in Ukraine. But oh my God, you're paying on vaccines. This is a hard line. Fuck out of here.
Like me who have similar concerns. So how do you win them over? What's your message to people who think like I do?
Well, but just tell me where you think I got it wrong.
Well, I think you get it wrong when you draw a correlation between the rise of things like autism and the introduction of vaccines when there isn't hard scientific evidence tying those things together.
How do you know? Let me ask you this. How do you know there's not a hard scientific evidence?
Well, because the one major study that purported to show that was retracted, and the scientist who conducted it was,
Now, what you're doing now,
basically
Crystal,
fraudulently created. Listen,
no.
Hold on.
You're
but
raising
I don't want to get in a debate with you about this because you've spent your life.
What a fucking cop-out. What a cop-out. So you say he's wrong, then RFK starts to dismantle your argument, and then all of a sudden you don't want to do a debate? I thought you asked him a question. Can you guys imagine the reaction if I did this to Marianne Williamson? Imagine if I asked Marianne Williamson about the two-state solution, and then Marianne Williamson explains why she supports the two-state solution, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to get bogged down by the details. Can you guys imagine if I did that? You guys want to know what I did instead? Marianne Williamson gave me a bullshit answer on the two-state solution, so I explained to her why the two-state solution, supporting that is completely wrong in a red line, because we see the result of the two-state solution. So supporting the two-state solution is saying you support the status quo. I explained this to Marianne Williamson, and you want to know her response to me? She called me a mansplainer. She said, "Oh, Nick, you're mansplaining to me." Did RFK accuse Crystal Ball of being rude? No. Even though Crystal Ball is being way ruder than I was to Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson was also on Fox News, where this host interrupted her way more times than I did, but she was just laughing it up with her class friend. So, are you going to let him answer the question? And if you didn't want to debate him on this issue, why are you sharing your thoughts? Because I'm all for debating people I interview. That's why I share my thoughts with Marianne Williamson. If you don't want to debate the issue, don't share your thoughts, ask the question, and move the fuck on. It's that fucking simple. You're doing this because you're trying to help your friend Marianne Williamson out because she's getting destroyed by this guy RFK in the polls. Pathetic.
Pulling out this study that I will tell you. Let me just tell you.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Let me just tell you.
I've
listened to hours of interviews with you with an open mind, and I'm not persuaded. Now, maybe I'm wrong. That's possible. I'll hold it out there. People can watch. I thought Megyn Kelly did a phenomenal interview with you that went through all these
things. Why are you
piece
still talking? You said I'm not persuaded by you, so shut the fuck up. Let him talk and see if he will persuade you. Why are you bringing up old interviews and old things he said when you got him right in front of you? That's why I didn't bring up old shit Marianne Williamson said when I interviewed her. When I asked her about the two-state solution, I didn't bring up her old quotes. I just asked her, point up, do you support the two-state solution? And I allow her to explain and hang herself. What Crystal is doing is unbelievably desperate.
Piece by piece, I really encourage people to watch that whole exchange because we won't be able to do it justice here in the 5 minutes we have left. But there are going to be...
You are on YouTube, ma'am. So you start this debate with RFK, you realize you're quickly out of your depth, and now all of a sudden you want to pretend you got a commercial break coming up? That's a surrender. How do you ask him a question, but you end up talking more to him during the course of his answer?
People like me who aren't persuaded and who see this as an issue, and the fact that it's been such a central part of your advocacy means I can't just sort of put it to the side and say, oh, well, I'll just ignore, this piece that's been really important to you in your life. So you're running in a Democratic primary. You have a lot of people who feel even more strongly than me who think that, Dr. Fauci is a hero and all of these things. How are you going to persuade them? How are you going to reach them? And what is your message to them?
So I remember when Marianne Williamson was on Crystal and Kyle, and Crystal and Kyle asked Marianne Williamson a question. They said, do you believe that you can defeat Joe Biden? And Marianne Williamson said yes. And they just sit there like, she thinks she can win, guys. She thinks she can win. No pushback. No, not saying that, man, Marianne Williamson, I don't know if the Democratic Party electorate would like you for this. I don't think they would like you for this. I don't think they would like you for this. But when she have RFK on, someone who's polling way better than your friend Marianne Williamson, you're like, man, RFK, I talk to a lot of Democrats. I don't think you stand a chance. Can you tell me why you're going to win? It's so, like, this kind of journalism is so biased. It's so ridiculous that these people pretend they're independent. I'll let it play for a bit.
First of all, I'm not leading with, my opinions about vaccines. What I say to people is show me where I got it wrong. Show me where I got my science wrong. I've written books about this. I wrote a book about the link between thimerosal and autism that has, I think, 450 distilled scientific studies that confirm and validate that hypothesis, and 1,400 references. And if I got something wrong, show me where it is.
But I think people have shown you where things are wrong, but you don't want to hear it. Is because I've seen, numerous
people said you was wrong. Random people, I'm not going to quote them. People said you was wrong. I can't say you're wrong, but I'm going to just say people say you're wrong so my audience will get the opinion that you're lying. Are you going to give any examples, Crystal? Any at all? Don't worry, I'll wait.
Fact checks Dr. Vinay Prasad, who we, really respect on the COVID vaccine. He went through your interview with All In. He did a fact check. I mean,
his fact check has already been thoroughly debunked, by the way.
It's not.
And I did a fact check of Vinay, and you should read that.
I will take a look at it, but I don't think that it's fair to say nobody has ever pointed out anything that's been wrong.
Well,
who cares if people point out? You're the interviewee. You're interviewing him. I'll just say. You should ask him questions, especially since you disagree with him, and be very specific on what he's getting wrong, but you are not able to do that.
People complain about what I say. And I'm not leading on this issue, so people can either take it or leave it. But if you want to, what you just said about me, that I'm sort of hard-headed and stubborn and just won't give in, you're wrong about that. If somebody shows me where I'm wrong, I'm going to correct it. And, we have probably the most robust fact-checking operation now in North America. I have 350 PhD scientists and MD physicians on, CHD's advisory board, including until recently, Luc Montagnier won the Nobel Prize for discovering the HIV virus. Chris Portier, who's the head of the National Toxicity Program at NIH, formerly, probably the top toxicologist in America. And if I were saying things that were scientifically unsound, those people would not stay with us. What I would say to you is, show me where I got it wrong. Show me a study where I got wrong, and I will change my position. Science is fluid. It's not an embarrassment to me if there's a new scientific study that I haven't seen that comes out and says I'm wrong. That's what you're supposed to do with science. But what I'm saying to you, nobody has done that. If Vinay Prasad, when he did his piece, if he showed me science that was valid, I would say I would change my position.
If we got the two of you together,
read my
response to him.
So you say this isn't what you're leading with, but I just have to say, as someone who, is watching your candidacy closely and is aware of the advocacy you've been doing and, the organization that you are involved with, it's hard for me to believe this won't be an important part of how you govern. So
Get the fuck out of here. So I watched your interview with Marianne Williamson. Once again, this shows your biases. Now, I'm not saying that's not a good question, but Marianne Williamson supports arming Nazis in Ukraine. So why didn't you ask her about that and say, oh man, I think your judgment, you want to fund NATO, you're wanting to fund the violent Azov battalion, wouldn't that affect the way you govern? Why don't they ask Marianne Williamson that question? Because that's a no-go for me. That's a non-starter. That's a non-starter. So if Marianne Williamson or any progressive, if your judgment is so bad that you are okay with funding Biden's proxy war that has completely destabilized geopolitics and the quality of life for many and for millions of people around the world, if your judgment is that bad where you fall for the Ukraine war hoax like Marianne Williamson, why should I trust you to govern on anything else? You notice they never asked Marianne Williamson those questions, but she asked RFK those questions. Now, I am okay with grilling RFK. I am not okay with inconsistencies. Weaponized hypocrisies and weaponized inconsistencies is a form of corruption.
So I think that's the most important piece for people to get, who you have to accept there are going to be people like me who just don't agree with you on this. You certainly understand that there are many who do.
Why are you making this interview about you? When I clicked this interview, I was like, man, I want to see what RFK say. I didn't click this interview like, man, wonder if Crystal Ball is okay with RFK's opinion.
That the vaccines that we have are more beneficial than harmful, that, got their kids vaccinated and are happy for that decision. So how is this going to impact the way that you govern, or does it not at all?
I mean, I'm going to govern according to, what evidence-based medicine. That's
so let me give a specific question. If there's another pandemic, in the last pandemic, former President Trump, something we gave him a lot of credit for, he launched Operation Warp Speed. They had a whole of government approach. They used the mRNA technology that was developed using, U.S. taxpayer dollars to get a vaccine out to the population as quickly as possible. How would your approach have differed?
My approach would have been a science-based approach.
Which means what?
Which means and a medicine-based approach, the approach that has been used for,
I'll let it play all the way through at this point.
You look first at therapeutics that are off the shelf, and you look at the efficacy of those. I mean, what I would have done if I was in power then, I would have created an information grid, because now we have this internet that is supposed to benefit us and has become instead an instrument for, totalitarian control. But let's use it for something good. Let's link all 15 million scientists, doctors, frontline physicians all over the world, and find out what they're doing to treat this new respiratory virus, and find out what they're saying is working and not working, and then test that with science, and then turn it instantaneously into protocols and recommendations for other scientists.
So would a vaccine development be part of that or not?
Well, I don't think the vaccine worked. I think, if you think it worked, then try to explain to me the countries that were unvaccinated did much better than our.
Many of those countries, because there are a lot of different factors in various countries. So a lot of those countries, as you pointed out before,
why do we have the highest death rate in the world by far?
See, after this shit, I never want to hear a Marianne Williamson fan ever complain about my interview with her. I interrupted her way less than this. Way less. I let Marianne Williamson go on a long bullshit spiel before I interrupted her, because all right, she's wasting our time. She won't stop. So I wonder if the same people who had criticism of me in how I interview Marianne will keep that same interview for Crystal Ball. And like many people say, I'm not going to pump. A lot of people say I was polite. I was very nice to Marianne Williamson, but she crumbled because my question was so pointed and my question exposed her. Never I want to hear a Marianne Williamson fan ever complain about my interview again after this, ever again.
I think there are a lot of factors that may go into that. One of them is the fact that we are disproportionately obese as a society. We have the negative health outcomes that you've been talking about. We don't go outside as much as countries, say in Africa. I mean, there are a lot of different factors that may play into that. But I will say Did the vaccines work in the way they were initially promised to prevent spread? No, I don't think so, especially once you got to later variants. But we have a lot of data that shows that in terms of reducing severe hospitalization and death.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was an RFK interview. I didn't know this was a radar. I didn't know this was a radar with Crystal Ball gonna lecture us about vaccines. I thought it was an interview. Oh no, my bad, I guess.
The vaccines were really important, and maybe there was a cost-benefit analysis.
I want to see that data. I know that's what the industry says.
There is lots of data, and not just from here, from around the world, that shows the vaccine doses, and not just our vaccines.
And also, I hate this talking point because people always say this. People say, "Well, America is uniquely different because America struggles with obesity." You guys know, even though America is the second fattest country next to Mexico, that obesity rates are sky high in Europe too. Like, and when you look at Europe, they struggling with obesity too. Not as much as America, but it's a Western problem. Like, it's not just an American problem. Like, you guys think everyone's skinny in Europe? It's a global phenomenon of obesity. America is just uniquely bad. So this thing where they pretending that other countries are not fat is not true. It's so stupid to say that.
That were created all around the world reduce severe hospitalization and death. So in that way, yes, I do very much believe that they were.
And let me tell you something. What I believe you're doing now is you're parroting what the public health agencies have been saying, but they do not have a scientific basis for that. And I have another book out that you should look at called Died Suddenly, that goes through all the Johns Hopkins data, which is the dashboard data that everybody used, and shows exactly what happened when first of all, the vaccine, the Case Western study that is probably the largest, most recent, shows that at most the vaccine gives you a very, very small amount of protection, and that after 7 months, you go into negative efficacy. So you are more, if you got vaccinated, you're more likely to get sick, you're more likely to get severe illness, and you're more likely to die than if you were unvaccinated.
I have not seen that. I have seen study after study that shows the opposite. Listen, I don't want to get bogged down in this because I don't think we're going to see.
I don't want to get bogged down in this because she just now realized she's getting dismantled.
I hear, and we have some other questions we want to get to, and your time is short. But we'll put in post, please send us what you're looking at.
Yeah, we're happy.
We'll put what I'm looking at, and people can judge for themselves.
Sagar is like, man, I'm so fucking tired of her. So, funding war in Ukraine, not a red line for Crystal Ball. Okay. So I am sure you're consistent in your red line in vaccine hesitancy, right? I'm sure you are. I can't believe that Marianne Williamson supporters are really doing this. I make fun of people in an American political discourse all the time because the memory of most people who follow politics is that of a goldfish. Marianne Williamson supporters, do you guys remember what they used to say about her? Do you guys remember what they used to say about Marianne Williamson? They called her an anti-vax crank.